Okay, I'll call to order the January 4th, 2022 Placer County Board of Supervisors special meeting, and we'll start with a flag salute led by County Council Karen Swap.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first of all, I'll wish everybody a Happy New Year, 2022. Who would have thunk? But I'm happy about it. And our single agenda item today is to consider a proclamation of declaring a local emergency in Placer County to the big storm we recently had. And with that, I'll turn it over to County Exec Todd Leopold.
All right, wonderful. First, thank you for the flexibility to get together. I know this is a special meeting, but I think there's a lot of importance here. The last, I'd say, 2 weeks have been pretty just unprecedented in recent memory, and I think it's created a great deal of coordination and effort. And so we're going to hear from Dave Atkinson with our Office of Emergency Services. We have the Sheriff's Office, we have CAL FIRE, we have some of our law enforcement, public safety folks, and then our road operations is here as well. And I just think, before we just start, I just want to say thank you to all of them. They've done such an outstanding job in unprecedented times. And so we're going to hear from some of the things that have gone on with the ultimate goal of taking action to ratify a emergency declaration that I brought forward last week, really to set the stage for any funding, coordination and efforts that need to happen under these sort of times. So I'll turn it over to Dave, and then we'll walk through folks that are here to talk about what's been going on.
All right, well, good morning. Dave Atkinson, Assistant Director of Emergency Services. As Todd mentioned, we're here to seek your approval to ratify a local emergency proclamation that we actually executed last week. I'll start off the presentation, and then I'll call on our Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant Tyndall is here to talk a little bit about the law enforcement response, and then, of course, CAL FIRE Unit Chief Brian Estes will also provide some presentation materials. So, of course, as we all know, we had a storm just before Christmas. We got a little bit of break there, actually, on Christmas Day. But leading up into that holiday weekend, National Weather Service was already forecasting a major winter storm that was likely to disrupt holiday travel and deposit a significant amount of snow in the high country. Forecast also included language discouraging mountain travel over the weekend and into the mid of the next week. One positive note in all of that forecast, though, was the fact that the debris flow risk for the river fire area, which is something we're also tracking now with every winter storm, was extremely low. So the winter storm that began on the night of December 26 resulted in record-setting snows. This is actually a statistic from the Berkeley Central Sierra Snow Lab, and the words they used in their press release was that this storm smashed the old record of 179 inches, and at least at the time of the board memo, we were at 197 inches, and we actually finished out December at 214 inches, so I suspect that record will stand for a while. Obviously, that amount of snow comes with significant impacts, one of which, the major one, of course, was the closure of I-80, and I'm a lifelong California resident, and I honestly can't remember I-80 being closed for such a long period of time in both directions like that, and then the starting and the stopping and opening in one direction and not in the other. All of those things transpired, of course, and caused significant impacts in terms of people trying to get in, people trying to get out, nowhere to go. And then, of course, you add to that the impacts of all of the winds, the downed trees, the heavy snow resulted in just over 10,000 Placer County service connections being without power the morning of December 27th. And there's just some pictures of, I think this is actually up at Norton Grade, some of the power lines that are down and just the amazing amount of trees that are down. So we've been working closely, obviously, with PG&E, really important to understand the power issue. We started at just over 10,000, and I'm happy to report that we're down to 4,300 without power this morning, so a significant improvement. Unfortunately, we're getting down to the ones that are going to be the toughest to repair. And so trying to do our best to get from PG&E some better information about just how long folks are going to be without power. and we even had snow down in Auburn. We had done a little bit of work ahead of time. The previous storm, actually, we began messaging our Ready Placer Road Conditions hub site. So we have a real-time map that Public Works can now use to update road conditions. If there's a tree down, if there's a rock slide, if there's a flooded road, our Public Works folks can update this map directly, and then this is public-facing for our residents to know with some speed what's open, what's closed. And this provided a useful tool as we went into the storm and started trying to assess what was passable and what was not. This map also includes a link to PG&E's power outage maps, which of course became incredibly useful as the response went on. And this is actually even a mobile-enabled app, so this can be used on your cell phone or a tablet, things like that. As part of the immediate response, the full depth of the National Incident Management System was activated, and so at the incident command level, and you'll hear from CAL FIRE and from the Sheriff's Office about their efforts as the tactical folks, and then at the next level up, the Standardized Emergency Management System in California, counties actually act as what's called the operational area. So not only do we have responsibility to take care of the unincorporated areas of the county as the local government, but we also provide a second line of coordination, resource sharing, and information management for the cities, special districts, and all of the other local agencies that make up the county. For example, I think we have over 29 water districts and water purveyors in the county, and so we provide support to those, and actually we got to know quite a few of them over this response, unfortunately. So a few statistics, obviously front and center in all of this was our county roads crews. I actually had to double check these statistics when I got them last night because I thought maybe I'd missed or I'd added too many zeros. They estimated 4,700 man hours between December 26th and the 2nd. They estimated that they moved about 6 million cubic yards of snow. And they estimated that's roughly not quite 400,000 dump truck loads. And that is, you think about that's about 10 times as much earthwork that's being moved for the Placer Parkway project. So that gives you just some idea of the sheer magnitude of all of this. Of course, there were hundreds of trees, and we honestly lost count after the first couple hours just how many downed trees there were. We also provided support to PCWA, PG&E, City of Colfax, and other county and non-county stakeholders. We actually had a pretty good coordination system going where we would get a report of a road closure. Is it a tree? We'll send in CAL FIRE. Is there an issue with a power line? We'll send in PG&E. We can't get to it, we'll send in county roads. And so by having our emergency operations center and having our folks right there, we were able to almost in real time coordinate those types of activities. And again, I'm sure that CAL FIRE and Sheriff's Office will expound more on those. We also had some challenges with this much snow in terms of trees falling on snow plows, trees getting jammed in blowers, utilities and things getting caught in blowers. That, it's already pretty challenging on this equipment when they're running this hard, but then you have the complications of things that really don't belong in them ending up in them. Our other big push, of course, in all of this is public information, because it's just so important to get out information to the public. Multiple next door reports were shared. Of course, our dashboard, which I talked about earlier. Joint statements by a couple of our supervisors, which we greatly appreciate. 41 Facebook posts, 102 Twitter updates, and 13 media interviews and media requests. And of course, that was, there could have been so much more. We were also able to bring in other county partners as part of our extended response. We used our mobile probation crew, actually, to help provide water to, I think this might be Shady Glen up in Colfax. They also provided some support in clearing out some of the schools. One of our high priorities was making sure that schools are opening today, and I'm glad to hear that my kids actually are going to go to school this morning. They were pretty excited after a winter break being cooped up at the house to go see their friends, and I think Mom was too. Also, PG&E continues to partner with us. They opened a PG&E Community Resource Center. Of course, this is a concept actually that was born out of the PSPS events that we have had. Where they provide a location where there's charging, information. That's probably the most critical piece that those PG&E centers provide, is there's a chance to actually talk to a PG&E person about their specific situation and what what the outlook is for a particular address. They're also providing some amenities, water, snacks, even some, I think they even have some mobile charging batteries that they can pass out to folks if they need them to keep their devices charged, because obviously we're all heavily reliant these days on our electronic devices. A lot of folks don't even have landlines and things at home anymore, and so making sure that you've got a charged device is incredibly important. And then, of course, we're starting to work on restoration. Again, I think this is our probation mobile crew out shoveling snow to help people get out. We also had our search and rescue folks and of course, CAL FIRE and even some of our sheriff deputies have just been out there shoveling snow, trying to get people out. And again, I think our folks here will talk a bit more about that. As I mentioned, we had some challenges with some critical infrastructure. Probably one of the most important is this is a picture of the Boardman Canal. So this is actually up near the River Fire burn scar. This comes off the Bear River Canal. And the Boardman Canal actually provides water to numerous other smaller water agencies as well as PCAWA. It runs right through Auburn actually and keeps on going. This is an incredibly critical piece of infrastructure. It appears what happened is a tree fell over, but it didn't just snap. The root ball and all came down and it basically took out the side of the bank. And of course, a lot of these canals, these all started as 1800s canals for hydraulic mining and things like that. So these were not designed to modern standards from the get-go. It's a ditch that was used for mining and then eventually turned over to a water company and then eventually became a critical component in our water infrastructure in this county. My hats are off to the engineering team at PCWA for coming up with this fix. We did provide some support to them in terms of CAL FIRE getting them in there with their chainsaw crews, snow plows, getting in, helping them gain access. So it was truly a group effort to get this rolling. And again, as I mentioned, this canal feeds numerous other water companies, and so it was just vitally important that we get this as well as a lot of the other water infrastructure up and running. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Tyndall with the Sheriff's Office.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Morning, members of the board. Happy New Year. Hope you had a great holiday season. I'm just going to scratch the surface, basically give you a snapshot of how the storms affected the Sheriff's Office and things that we were trying to accomplish and moving forward from there, and entertain any questions you might have. As far as the immediate response goes, obviously we had increased calls for service. I can go over that in a slide that's coming up here. Staffing is always a challenge because basically staffing and resources equate it to like a twin sheet on a calking bed. You're just pulling, you can't cover everything basically. So we had lengthier calls for service, meaning response times than actually when we were on scene, the challenges that we were facing there. So with the deputies on we had a call for service that lasted 6 hours. The deputies were there trying to help a citizen that was low on some insulin, and we were trying to get him out there, get him out of there. And then also one of our OHVs that had issues with the tracks, just like some of our other county partners. So we had a lot of stories like that, basically. So kudos to our folks for overcoming all those challenges like everybody else. We had a high demand for our equipment, limited amounts of equipment between our snowmobiles, our snowcat, and our OHV that we're able to track in the wintertime as well. Use it in the summertime, track it up in the wintertime. Example is we had the county communications division needed to get up to a couple towers, Alta, Colfax early on to ensure power was, we didn't lose power, didn't lose services to our communications division, so we were able to escort them up for there. So just a couple examples for the immediate response. Calls for service, here's just a snapshot from our dispatch center for calls for service. This right up here just shows some numbers. Monday, December 27th, the calls for service that we had, some examples versus the average daily call volume that we had the week before. You can see pretty much everything doubled from our one day versus the average the week before. 911 calls doubled. The next column on the left there, 10-digit emergency. That's our 530 10-digit number that we get emergency calls in. The next line there, non-emergency calls, 441 versus 180 the week before, daily average. Outbound calls are basically where the dispatcher receives a call or request either from the deputy or a probation officer or anybody, and they need to make an outbound call for some type of follow-up, request for DPO, animal control, CHP, fire, medical aid, you name it. So you can see the very bottom there, total combined calls on December 27th alone, 1,206 versus 559, the average daily the week before. So tremendous kudos to our dispatchers for weeding those calls as well. And just as type of sample of the calls that we had on the 27th through January 2nd, welfare checks, just for the areas affected by the storm, not throughout countywide. 105 welfare checks, allied agency assist 24, traffic hazards 38, and you can read down the line there. Total of 404 just in those affected areas alone. So the immediate response, additionally, what we did is we obviously sent beat deputies when we could. Again, going back to that twin sheet analogy, if it was going to be an extended call, the supervisors were trying to work with EOC, OES to find out what resource can we send. Should it be a sheriff's deputy? Is there somebody else that can respond? And should it be the beat deputy? Is it urgent, or do we need to keep that beat deputy more in the populated areas and then send somebody else? So we were always weighing those options out. And what we also did is we posted additional shifts between 9 in the morning to 7 at night for people to come work, deputies to work in those affected areas, up to 2 to 4 deputies at a time, depending on what resources we had available for them as well. So that's really, I think, alleviated a lot of the burden on our normal patrol staffing, is just doing that alone. And then we also used SAR volunteers as well when we could. A couple pictures you see right here, actually, some of our SAR volunteers either operating specific equipment like our Snowcat, or actually going up to respond to a place once it was deemed safe for them to help shovel snow, get somebody some propane, or if they were running low on gas for their generator or something like that. So they were invaluable as well. And then we also sent a sergeant in to hook up with the EOC 24/7 contact with that, and that was Sergeant Griffiths here, who oversees our Forest Hill and Colfax stations. So our extended response, we continue to post those extra shifts up in those affected areas for the deputies from 9 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. We continue to have Sergeant Griffiths in communication 24/7 with the EOC, either on scene or from home or from wherever he's at. And he's giving us updates with whatever, and we're supporting him however we can from the information he's getting from the EOC. We continue to utilize snowmobiles. We try and keep snowmobiles. We have a total of 4. We keep 2 on the Colfax side, 2 on the Forest Hill side. So we're constantly kind of shoveling. As long as the roads are open, we're shoveling wherever we need resources, because the problem is we were facing at least was out in the remote parts of Forest Hill and remote parts up 80. So there's no real quick way to get resources there. Kind of, again, the twin bed on in the Cal King sheet there. Our OHV vehicle has been invaluable. However, that is currently down right now. We had an issue, again, as I mentioned, where some debris got in the track, so we're trying to get that up and running. But we do have our Snowcat. That's been kind of our go-to is our Snowcat. And we're trying to train up some more people to be operating on that, because it's one of those things you don't realize. We don't have as many operators as we'd like until you have an event like this. So that's something we're trying to correct as well, and the extended response. And last but not least, 4-wheel drives. We have a limited amount of 4-wheel drives, believe it or not, at the sheriff's office. So when that detail is out working that extra area, they're basically using the 4-wheel drive, getting as close as they can, and good old-fashioned strapping on some snowshoes and getting into whatever residence they can to handle and assist however they can. So as far as the restoration goes, basically I just can't say enough how there's always room for improvement, at least for the sheriff's office. We want 100% every time, and we have a lot of room to work, but without the relationship and the heavy lifting that our folks, CAL FIRE has been doing, and the EOC and OES, probation, Department of Public Works, et cetera, that gap would be huge. So we just appreciate all their services. And at that point, I'll just take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions by board members? I see none, but again, on behalf of the board, thank you. Greatly appreciate all the energy and effort that you guys put forward with this, and thanks.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, board. Chairperson Wygant, I guess for the last meeting, right? Before it's officially transferred. Transfer of power.
Who's counting?
Oh, one more. Okay. Well, good morning and Happy New Year, Brian Estes County and State Fire Chief. And I'll tag on to where the Sheriff's Office left with some of our efforts over the last 7 days in support of our county and Office of Emergency Services. So going back to Sunday, December 26th, when we forecasted that we were going to have a out of the ordinary type event for the better part of a week, and after communication with OES, we established on the county fire side an incident command structure, and we took the entire unit and geographically divided it into 2 branches. The Placer County was designated as our eastern branch under the command of Assistant Chief Mike Rufinot, and the incident commander for the incident was initially Deputy Chief Jim Hudson, and then also Assistant Chief Brian Mackwood, who are all with me today. Our communication and establishment in the EOC in support of OES was initiated on Monday morning, the 27th, and much like the Sheriff's Office, has remained hand in hand with them through the week. The other thing that I think is important to mention, one of my partners, Chief Gao, is in the audience here with us today, and we communicated with our local fire district partners right off the bat, and that communication was to make sure that we had a single unified ordering point and a single point of contact, so we didn't have redundancy of orders or miscommunications. And thanks to the professionalism of our local districts, including our partners on the east side with North Star, North Tahoe, and Truckee, everyone agreed that the single point of contact would be County Fire in the EOC. So as those inputs would come in, we would try to solve problems for them through the county departments, or vice versa. If an issue came through the county, we were able to delegate out to those special districts and include them in the mitigation measures. And I think it worked very well. As Chief Gow and I were talking about, the county was able to help them out with a generator that kept one of their fire stations, Station 86, operational through the heat of the storm. So some of our immediate response, much like the Sheriff's Office, our 911 call volume spiked almost immediately. In just the affected areas, which is primarily our jurisdictional area up the 80 corridor, we ran 233 emergency responses, 911 calls over those 7 days. And that's in addition to just the normal call volume that occurs across the county fire system on any given day. We had 32 mutual aid assists to both Forest Hill Fire Protection District and Placer Hills Fire Protection District, and worked oftentimes with them on calls that were in bordering areas. And our Grass Valley Emergency Command Center dispatched 2,274 911 calls over that 7-day period. One of those days on the 27th was one of their top 5 busiest days on record in that ACC. We had a couple of highlighted calls. As it always seems, the 80 corridor gives us calls that are unique in nature. And so in the early morning hours of December 27th, about 3 in the morning, a young lady was coming over the hill for an emergency C-section, was trapped by downed power lines and trees on Interstate 80 and closed. She and her husband were trapped there. Our engine companies out of Station 33, with the assistance of some UP workers and some county public works workers that were on their way to work very early in the morning, assisted our crews, and they systematically worked Rollins Lake Road all the way down from basically the Alta area all the way down to the hospital so she could make her emergency C-section. Had a beautiful newborn baby, and is connecting with our crews. So, I love stories like that. As the Sheriff's Office talked about, the call off Casa Loma Drive 2 or 3 days ago, a 7.5-hour call involving snow machines, snowcats, side-by-sides, and upwards of 20 or 21 people to mitigate an off-the-grid patient for us. So a lot of those unique calls took place in those first couple days as well. Our daily resource commitment from CAL FIRE and PCFD generally consisted of, on the average, of about 14 engine companies assigned, both state and county, 5 of our Type 1 fire hand crews, which provided that integral road clearing support for public works and PG&E. We had all of our heavy equipment operators, loaders, graders, et cetera, working across the region, and about 15 to 20 people per day assigned to command and support staff positions. As Dave said, one of, I think, our critical resources we brought to the table in support of OES were our hand crews, and they worked in kind of a task force configuration, as Dave explained really well. Depending on the mitigation issue that came into OES, we were able to work directly with PG&E, Public Works, et cetera, to get some of those downed trees out of the way so that the roads could come in and plow those roads, and ultimately PG&E could come in and DC the communication lines and try to get power restored to those areas. And they're working out there as we continue right now, continuing that work. We also assisted OES in mitigation measures for some water supply systems, including the Boardman Canal, the Weimar Water District, one of the Kinder Morgan pipeline pump stations that was out of power and pumping Jet A fuel over to Reno was reestablished by opening up that road system. And of course, our infrastructure and radio repeaters on Mount Howell and other mountaintops around the area, which within 2 or 3 days were running out of emergency propane for their generators. So a lot of great work by the hand crews. In total, over the last 7 days or so, we've committed about 2,500 personnel hours to this mission. Those costs have been borne because of mission tasking and our relationship with the county. Those costs have been borne entirely by the state of California and will have no impact to the county of Placer. And we will stay committed as your fire department to this mission supporting OES. As the primary agency having jurisdiction, will support them through the full restoration process. So I want to thank you and thank Dave for his leadership, thank our partnership with the Sheriff's Office and our allied agencies, and of course your leadership as the board to bring all these agencies together. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions, comments by board members? I see none, but also, again, Brian, on behalf of the board, county, thank you very much for huge commitment during all of this. Thank you.
Got it.
All right, so just a quick wrap up, talk a little bit about kind of where we go from here. So we continue to have community resource centers. This is actually a summertime picture of the Alta location. Looks a little bit different right now with a fair amount of snow. So PG&E will continue to operate that. We're also working with them to possibly open up a center, possibly as soon as today in Forest Hill, and then looking at other locations depending upon the outlook for the continued power restoration efforts. I also wanted to thank the city of Colfax. We've had a great partnership with them. Of course, as you know, they declared a local emergency fairly early on. We were able to pretty quickly provide them with support and mutual aid, both through plowing. We were able to quickly open up the Veterans Memorial Hall there in Colfax, and they've been doing an outstanding job operating that as a charging center. And I understand the American Legion is even serving 3 meals a day there, and bringing folks in kind of from outside the community to come in and get a hot meal and some information and things like that. So those partnerships continue to work well, and we will continue to support those efforts. So next steps. So obviously roads continues to have some work to do to continue to widen those roads. I understand that just about every road is open at least one lane, but obviously the goal is to get those back open full width. But as we talked about, there's just a significant amount of snow that needs to be moved, and it has to be done fairly methodically and fairly slowly so that we don't overwhelm the equipment and put snow in places where we don't want it. We're going to continue, of course, with the restoration efforts. That's our going to be a big focus from here on out, is trying to get the rest of those 4,000 plus people back in power. We'll be working with our partners to figure out what support services those folks might need to survive and to thrive while they're waiting for their power to come on. And of course, we have our partners with HHS on the line here too to help answer any questions associated with that. And then, of course, not only do we have a local emergency, but we also now have a state level emergency proclamation, which now opens up the possibility of reimbursement through the California Disaster Assistance Act. And so OES is already getting started on that. We'll actually have an initial damage assessment due to Cal OES today in order to keep that process moving. So we'll be very focused on that. With that, happy to answer questions. We've got Health and Human Services here, Public Works is with me, CAL FIRE, Sheriff's Office, and I also have a representative from PG&E should you have any questions that you wanted to ask of them. And that concludes our presentation. Then, of course, we're looking for your board's approval to ratify the local emergency. And then, of course, we'll be back to your board every 60 days thereafter if we decide that we need to continue this on. And with that, happy to answer questions, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And again, on behalf of the board and the county, thank you for the great work that you did during all of this. And a lot of folks don't understand that counties actually have offices of emergency services, and that you, in this case, are the glue that holds together all of these resources on behalf of the county side of all of this effort. So one question I'll start off with. During the storm, I had a conversation with regards to some of the technical stuff behind whether or not we declare an emergency and what changes, whether or not we do, as compared to typically, in my experience, after 27 years, that a state, federal government may in fact declare emergencies, and that provides a platform for additional resources. And so if you could maybe just describe a little bit about that process and what it means locally.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
As I mentioned earlier, the county has somewhat of a dual role in the way that California has their emergency management set up. So our first role is, of course, to the unincorporated areas. We are the first line emergency management system in place for those areas. And then, of course, the other piece of that role is that we are that second tier, the operational area, as it's referred to, for the cities, the towns, the special districts, the water companies. All of those would rely on us as the operational area to provide that second level support. So in terms of us declaring a local emergency, we might do that. The county might take that step either in support of a local jurisdiction. If we felt like we were unable to support the city of Colfax after they declare, then we would be moved to make that step. The other option is, again, if the county felt like we needed additional resources, local emergencies also provide some additional procurement powers, which speed up the process to bringing in resources. That's probably one of the bigger reasons that we want to declare, the ability to, I don't know if we need to buy more gas cans or, get the track fixed on, some piece of equipment. We have the option to move a little faster than we might otherwise would because of the circumstances. And then, of course, a lot of times these local declarations include, as this one does, a request from the state for additional resources and assistance through CDAA. So any or all of those would lead us to declare a local emergency. And I look back, I think we declared in 2017. This county, I think, has been fairly, I would say, sparing in their use of the local emergency. We have a fair amount of resources. I think we have a very resilient community, but there are times when we just need that extra help.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Cindy.
Thanks, and I want to start with trying to express gratitude to everybody who's worked around the clock during these storms, and the communication, Dave, thank you, and Chief Estes especially, because we were in constant communication. I had questions immediately, as you know, from Forest Hill Fire needing resources, but shortly after that, Alta, Dutch Flat, many of our folks were trapped. While this probably only affected 2/3 of my district, maybe 3/4, but we also had tens of thousands of visitors in and around the region, and I think we can't go far enough in explaining how that impacts services. So our gas stations ran out of fuel, our grocery stores ran out of food, one major one was closed over one of the periods up in the eastern, over the summit. In general, their power outages were much briefer, and yet with I-80 closed, not only I-80, what was failed to be mentioned is we had an avalanche at 89 closing, and 267 was closed. So at one point for I don't know how many hours, because I was just watching the news to get these updates, and that is a communication issue I want to talk more about, there was no way in or out of the Tahoe Basin. And that is always an issue when we have emergency response or medical emergencies. Fortunately, I found out because my son was on duty at North Tahoe Fire for 5 days or 7 days or whatever it was, that they were able to get patients to Truckee. But to the average person, we didn't know how the depth of that avalanche was. That is a known slide path, and it slid many, many times in my history up there. But when you're cut off not only from 80 both directions, but then 267 and 89, it really is important for us to communicate with the public what their options are and what they should do, especially when we have so many visitors who don't know and are maybe not equipped. Hopefully, we've been through enough storms in some of our areas of the 5th District that we know to fuel up, we know to get prepared, check our batteries, get everything set, get our wood uncovered from feet of snow to make sure we can have a fire if the power goes out or whatever needs to happen. I was told it was a war zone, in Dutch Flat and Alta, and further down the mountain, certainly Forest Hill and Todd Valley. But was unable to get off the hill to get down to see it. And when I did on Wednesday 80 opened, and I decided that was probably not the best day to get on the road amidst everybody else trying to get in and out and emergency supplies to get over the summit. I came down on Thursday and drove through, and literally was afraid to get out of the car and take photos, because not only were the trees down already, but there were so many low-hanging trees that clearly were ready to snap off given the vulnerability in and around Alta and Dutch Flat. So, and then I was able to get up to Forest Hill on Friday or Saturday and drive through and see some of those areas as well. But it is definitely a record-breaking storm, and snow was not the issue. It really was the tree fall, and obviously that impacted power, and we'll talk about that. But in addition to everything else you were dealing with, we had a lost skier, tragically, at North Star, and I really appreciate all the resources. I was on the phone with the general manager or president of North Star this morning. They're going to resume searching. They do know it's a recovery at this point, but they are using some new technology that hasn't been used, I guess, in the Sierra before. Let me get this right, RECO, that looks for reflections. They're flying low with CHP helicopters and trying to track the skier that way. They're going to drop some flags and continue the search to find comfort for the family and their staff at North Star, because he was known to their staff and worked there in one of the concessions. So that, along with this avalanche at 89, I don't think was brought up so that you understand the magnitude of what was going on. Then Caltrans communications. For me, again, communication is the big theme you're going to hear from me, is making sure we have that point of contact both with roads and with Caltrans. When they opened eastbound 80, they opened 50, then it immediately had a jackknife big rig. People were lined up from Truckee trying to get, because 80 was closed, they had to get out of their rentals. It was a big peak weekend where every short-term rental and every hotel was full. And they had to leave, but they had nowhere to go. And so many of them tried to get around 50. That became a log jam. 50 closed again, and then everybody trying to leave South Shore. People came back around the lake. Now they're waiting, trying to get on 80 westbound. It did take 12 hours. I think it was about a 12-hour window till 80 was opened at 9 o'clock, 8:30 or 9 that night. But that communication, so that we can educate our visitors, where can they wait? We don't want them on the side of the road. We don't want them impeding traffic, but they've got to get out of whatever accommodation they're in as a visitor, and we're not set up for that. So working with our business community to better inform our visitors would be, is a lesson learned, and I'm regurgitating a lot of things I've already sent you in emails, Dave, because I've been through enough of these emergencies. You don't live up there as many years as I have and not have gone through fires and floods and avalanches and things. So. But I think communication is the one thing that I felt. I did reach out to Caltrans a couple times through my contacts, but obviously those weren't the people actually on the road knowing, what the situation was and how we would open one entrance funnel into Tahoe at a time when we couldn't get people out. And that was definitely a challenge. Emergency supplies were needed. Obviously, fuel was out. The gas stations were down to premium. I can tell you what premium costs now for those of you who aren't sure what premium gas is in Tahoe. It was over $6 a gallon, but didn't need much, thankfully. And that wasn't the county car, so don't worry. But I think we can learn a lot through communications, and I think it was bad timing too. I do believe, and I'd love to hear from Rhodes, was fuel an issue for our own? Do we have enough storage for fuel for our own vehicles? Do we work cooperatively with the other districts? I know they were without fuel too. They were running low on all their fuel supplies because they couldn't get suppliers back up to refuel. Propane is an issue for all these generators. I was talking to a gentleman this morning at Auburn Medlars who tracked down what some of the issues are with supply on propane. It isn't just overuse, it's also the supply chain. And some of the fuel vehicles were stuck at South Shore for Flyers Energy, were stuck down there for a couple days and couldn't refuel some of our stations. So a lot of issues there. We are, I guess, transferring to the libraries now, charging centers, and I'd like to know more about those hours so we can make sure we're posted, because it isn't clear to me if the library's going to be open 7 days a week till the power is back reestablished, or is it 5, and then...
So, kind of our standard procedure, for either a heat event or a cold event, things like that, our libraries have been a great partner. So that's generally our first line of defense, and I'll say that Mary George and her team have always been very accommodating with that. So knowing that the library was normally closed on Mondays, they are back open today. But at the same time, as I mentioned, we're working with PG&E actually, because the need is, I still would say, is fairly great beyond what maybe we would normally expect. We are working with PG&E to get a CRC open in Forest Hill, so that, the library will obviously still be available as its normal hours, of course, but then we'll have the CRC location at the Veterans Memorial Hall in Forest Hill.
And we'll keep the Alta facility going?
The Alta facility will continue until restoration is 100%.
Okay.
We'll have the Forest Hill facility until things up there are 100%. I'll be talking to the city of Colfax to find out, what their feelings are about how much longer they can support what they have going, and if we need to transition that to something else. So we've got our own dedicated contact in the EOC with PG&E now. So they've brought up extra staff. They recognize that there's a need to bolster their response as well. So that person's just a text message away. And, we were working, on into the night on the Forest Hill one, and we'll be working on Colfax and wherever else we decide we need one, depending on what the restoration picture looks like. And I know that's a big push today, is hopefully we're going to get a good update on where we're at with restoration. And as I mentioned, Brandon Sanders is here, and
Great.
he might be able to shed a little more light if you'd like on
Yeah,
maybe
I'd
some
love
of
to
those.
hear that too, but on cell towers, do we think we have pretty good cell service? Because that's the other issue. We rely
Right.
heavily on people calling us or calling 211 or 911 if they don't have,
So I
Cell service.
have learned a lot more about how the cell system works in the last few days, and microwave towers, and who leases who as T1 lines back to the microwave site and that. And there's a lot of actually, I'll say, interconnectivity between the major cell phone carriers. I think at one point I heard that T-Mobile was actually the best carrier at certain places. But we've got good contacts with them now. They've kind of stabilized their situation. If I can say that there's a good that came out of the PS is the CPUC required the cell phone providers to basically mandated that they have their own generation capabilities, and so at least that piece of the system was working. But we did learn where some other weak points are in terms of, as I mentioned, the microwave towers and some line breaks and things like that. So generators don't do you good at any of the towers if the communication between the two towers or the control center isn't working.
great. Well, I think that should inform our investment in broadband and infrastructure as well, and what the county invests in for ensuring, whether it's fire or snow or whatever other emergencies that are going to come our way this year or next
Right.
year, that we're prepared with that communication, because we rely on it for
Right.
everyone to call us to report issues. And so, for the public that's watching this, I did take away a lot from Nevada County had a town hall last night that I was able to watch parts of, and reminding everyone again to check on your neighbors, check on your friends, especially the elderly or those who may need assistance that are still out in these outlying areas without potentially having service, and very cold nights for most. Hopefully this is a bit of a warm-up right now, but it was very, very cold during the peak of this. And the propane issues go throughout the surrounding counties and obviously throughout the state, but trying to get propane for these generators, if there's assistance we can be from the county to assist in that. I would love to know if we have statistics on the 211 calls that we received. I know we've gotten great 911 calls through both.
So as of last night, I believe we were at 208 calls to 211. Important to remember that we use 211 Connecting Point. They're a contract service provider, and they do great. They also service the County of Nevada. So we had to do a little bit of work to kind of separate things out, but they've had 208 calls for specifically related to the weather event since we started on the morning of the 27th.
And how many of those were we able, did we have adequate resources to help all of those folks that called?
So I might look to Mike Romero, but my understanding is we were, for the people who we could actually reach back to, and some people left a number and haven't responded since we called back. My understanding is all of the referrals have been handled. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. Mike Romero, HHS Program Manager. So of those 200 plus calls, about a handful of those result in referrals to HHS each day, and nearly every one of them we were able to find a resolution for that call or whatever that issue might be. Given that we can't do things like deliver fuel, clean out individual private driveways, things like that. Thank you.
And then, thank you for that, Michael. I'm glad to hear part of that, but, the fuel supplies and issues are something that, I'd love to talk further about for future situations. What can we do in those situations? I know volunteer groups in Nevada County and the firewood program was a big hit. I was asked by the mayor of Colfax to investigate whether we could offer that similar service. Apparently, they've had that service in place.
Right, their seniors have had that for, I think, a 15-year run so far with that firewood program.
Certainly, we're going to have lots of wood.
Right.
We already had a lot of wood coming out of our forests, and Mother Nature helped us with some more wood. But I would like to talk, if I could, with Ken, or I have a couple questions for the roads, on this debris. What sort of resources do we need? A lot of it's on the county right-of-way.
Right.
And it's also right along the county right-of-way with the trees that are still vulnerable. So what sort of resources do we need to get that wood removed and cleanup to occur? So whoever wants to... And any other reports on snow removal, because I know people are anxious to get more areas
So,
open.
because you had a question about fuel too, and
Yeah.
fuel issues. So I guess first, pick
First,
these off.
Matt Randall and,
Yeah, Matt Randall, Placer County Public Works Road Division Manager. So, first question with trees. So yeah, hundreds of trees on the side of county roads. And so between our own road crews and working with CAL FIRE, we kind of addressed the initial issues, but moving forward, we've worked with procurement, and procurement is authorized. We have on-call tree contracts that we're going to use. So we've already got contractors in Forest Hill, and then 3 other contractors coming up from the valley that we're hoping some of them can even start as early as today to start removing some of the trees on our shoulders. And I think one of the things that's going to be an ongoing complication, I think, with this is just the trees and snow. So we're starting with the lower elevations and working up. I think that's a developing situation. I think we just want to get in and start working, and then as we get some of these trees out and work at the higher elevations, we could get lucky and get a break, and then maybe we can address more of them. I think it becomes an issue of equipment, things like that. But for now, I think we just want to get going with contractors and use the private sector resources we can. So that would be the first question.
fuel?
Fuel. So fuel was definitely, I think it was an issue, but we were lucky. So we have fuel at all of our yards. So Forest Hill, Colfax, Cabin Creek, and then Burton Creek as well. So our foremen are very good about, the one thing during a response like this, all the equipment is running, so we go through diesel, obviously very fast. And in terms of getting fuel to Forest Hill and Colfax, for the most part, pretty responsive. There was a big demand, I would say, on the fuel suppliers as well, but we were able to get fuel to the places we needed to without any operations stopping. As far as the basin goes, that's a whole nother unique issue, and I think that the dodging the bullet was really with the avalanche on 89, because getting between Cabin Creek and Burton Creek, that was closed. So we had enough fuel in Burton Creek, and I know with the avalanche the timing was okay. that we, I think that operationally, the way that it works is when fuel was out at Burton Creek, we would go to Cabin Creek and run fuel with trucks and fuel cells to all the equipment. So none of that, there wasn't any interruption, but if the avalanche had closed the road for longer, we might have seen some issues. So equipment kept running. I know with just keeping pickup trucks and things like that fueled, our guys were getting creative in terms of going to places where they knew there was gas up in the basin, I think too. So it definitely was an issue, although I'm not sure I would say it slowed us down, or severely impacted our operation. So,
But it's certainly something we could assist in investing in the
Absolutely.
infrastructure to have larger tanks and more supply dropped
Absolutely.
off before a big event.
100%, as far as a lesson learned and
Right,
what to do in the
right.
future. Okay, so as far as snow removal goes, as far as, so in the Tahoe area, and we could talk about it lots of different ways, but the report I'm getting right now is that, the way that, is that we have everything open up wide enough as far as this morning for 2 vehicles. And I think, the issue with this storm, it was so much snow so fast. And, we have 3 pieces of equipment to remove snow. We've got graders, we've got snow blowers, and then we have these, we call them push plows, but it's like a truck mounted plow. And with the volume of snow coming down so fast, the plows were still moving snow around, but I think it was really the blowers, when you get the deep snow, that really cutting the roads open were the things that needed to happen faster. It took us a while to dig out. But I think, this is something for us, just looking at the other agencies. I mean, it took Caltrans a while to dig out too. I think it was just a lot of snow, I think, to deal with. So that would be the Tahoe area. Serene Lakes always gets a lot of snow, so I think for them it was more business as usual. But I think the low snow for sure, it was something we just don't see it going all the way down to Auburn usually. We usually have about 200 miles of roadway to plow. With this storm, it was more like 450 miles. So I think, the Colfax district, it was kind of an all hands on deck situation where they were doing their normal routine up in Serene Lakes, but the volume of snow in Alta, Dutch Flat, Colfax, all of that, we had lots of staff coming up from the western side of the county to open up roads. So the only road that I had heard was not open yet was the Norton Grade Road that Dave showed which was a war zone, was an accurate way of saying it. I think there were several roads like that all over the Colfax, Alta, Dutch Flat area. But I know there are crews there this morning. We had a lot of issues with, and I think it's in some ways, these emergencies are, it's just cool to work together. I think with CAL FIRE, Sheriff, PG&E, we did a lot of collaboration, but we did have a lot of complications with utilities, and we would plow up to, utilities, and then you have to work together to try to get things to go from there, and I think took time. I think, too, the magnitude of trees, some of the trees were just, they're big, huge, pine trees and things like that. So anyway, I would say those are all my thoughts on snow plowing. I think the last road, that Norton Grade, it was a segment there, hoping it'll be done today, and then we'll be all open. And then, I think like Dave was saying too, one of the issues, we'll get wide enough for 2 lanes and then keep trying to widen out all the way to the snowplow stakes and go further. That'll take a little bit more time too, but I know our guys it's tough. It's a pretty big effort, I think, feeling good from that point of view. But definitely, we're not perfect always. Lessons learned, like you mentioned too, as far as communication and other things. So.
And you did
Anyway.
bring on some extra contractors, I know, in certain areas.
That's right.
For snow removal, so I appreciated that. I just want to make sure the board knew we didn't just
Yeah.
rely on our county resources.
That's
We
right.
actually activated some other contractors who have the larger equipment
Right.
to help and assist in those areas. Thank you.
Anything else
Appreciate,
I
and I
missed?
know the crews have been working, I see them everywhere, and.
Yeah.
and, Actually, downtown, at least when I left Tahoe on Sunday, 28 was in worse shape than many of the county roads through
Yeah.
downtown Tahoe City, because Caltrans hadn't yet blown that. They've just pushed it to the side. So it's a very narrow road with a lot of businesses impacted by that, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think looking forward, there's lots of interesting issues and lessons learned, I think, to talk about in terms of having, I think Caltrans and the county in general, having qualified operators and truckee too, just to make sure we can keep up with those types of things. So anyway.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yep.
Thank you. And then, do you mind if we talk about PG&E or get a little update? Because I do know our public is watching and wants to know when power may come back, and I know Brandon made it all the way here, so.
Hi, good morning, Chairman Wygant, board members. Brandon Sanders, Sierra Division Government Affairs, PG&E. I'm going to just open by saying nothing I'm going to say here to you this morning. It changes the fact that we've got thousands of customers that are suffering, and we're working to do our best to bring them back into service. So I do have an update that I prepared for you ahead of our morning incident calls. So this data is as of 0600. I'm going to talk about damage, customer impacts, and crew resources, just to kind of give a picture of what we have going on out there. So for Placer County, we currently have documented 1,085 individual damage locations across the affected area. That breaks down into 519 damaged conductors, 249 poles that were destroyed, 175 cross arms that need to be replaced, and 39 transformers. So that's just in Placer County. Across the entire division, we're well over 3,000 individual damage locations, and we have not completed assessment in some areas due to access and other challenges. In terms of crew resources, specific to Placer County, and these are still numbers, they've grown by double digits just this morning. But as of 0600, we had 34 line crews, which are typically 2 trucks, a bucket truck, and an auger truck. 36 troublemen, these are the individuals that make safe, work with your roads departments to clear downed equipment, and support CAL FIRE also in clearing roads. Hundreds of additional personnel as it relates to estimators, engineers, clerical, compliance inspectors, safety officers, and of course, we wouldn't be able to get anything done if we didn't have 33 veg management crews operating in Placer County today. As of this morning at 0600, we had 6,199 customers out on 243 outages. As Dave shared, that's down in the 4,000 range as of this morning, so that shows you we've made some progress already today. It's important to note that 65 of those are single customers. Those are the more challenging situations. And one piece I'll just share for those watching on the webcast. If you have damage to the weatherhead that comes out of your roof above your electrical panel, that is the customer's obligation to repair. Once the weatherhead is repaired by a qualified electrical worker, we will come in and install a new service drop from the transformer to your home. I guess I'll just close my comments by saying we find ourselves here in the second week of what I would consider an extraordinary event. The forested landscape, stressed by a prolonged drought coupled with heavy snow, has caused tree failure on a massive scale, and certainly challenging our abilities and putting our customers in a very difficult position, which we fully acknowledge. My last comment would be just to provide a bit of a bigger picture. Since Christmas in Sierra Division, which is El Dorado, Placer, Nevada, and Sierra counties, we have already restored over 175,000 customers, with the remainder as of this morning being around 20,000 remaining out of service. That's my update. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Any other questions for Brandon?
I just think what everybody wants to know, and I know you have to wait till you complete your assessment, but is there any projections on timelines? Because that indicates what kind of resources we need to help our constituents with.
Yes, so we have a commitment from senior leaders to populate estimated times of restoration for all impacted customers today. We're shooting for noon. That could slide a little bit, but as of the time I prepped my information here this morning, We've got a lot of customers who are projected to be restored today. And I think as of this morning, I saw the furthest out estimated time of restoration, or ETOR, as January 9th. So those will be fully populated. I would encourage customers to continue tracking either on our website or by calling our 1-800-PGE-5000. But we have a directive from senior leaders to populate those times today, no later than today.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and of course, I know you've agreed to participate in a couple of town halls so that we can further update with those projections, and I just, my plea to anybody in the public is let us know what your resource needs are so that we can support you. It's pretty darn hard to be out without power for short periods of time, let alone these kinds of temperatures and these kinds of conditions for extended periods, so. Thank you for all the work. I saw the crews everywhere and your contractors everywhere
Yeah,
helping.
we've brought in everyone that's available. So.
Yeah. Thank you. That
Thank
was
you all.
all, Robert, sorry.
So Cindy, before we leave, is there anyone else, staff or otherwise, that you actually could like some specific information or to share some information from?
No, I think I've caught a few of them off to the side about, you know, it's just about communication so that we can help inform our business community and our visitors. I-80 visitors, you know, we're impacting our community. I forgot to thank Ken and Matt. The signs were really helpful. It doesn't keep everybody from going through those communities when it says road closed, residents only, because even I was out there driving around. But nobody yelled at me, thankfully. But that is an issue, that we have people that get off and go through those communities when they shouldn't be out there. And but those signs were appreciated by the Dutch Flat and Alta communities, so thank you for getting those up. And it's something we can continue to talk about.
Yeah. And before, while you're all still up there, and I'll just add a couple of things, but I'm going to open it up to the public also, obviously. But Brandon, I think your assessment that it was an extraordinary event is in fact a good foundation upon which to build, because every time we live through an emergency, and with my tenure on the board, there have been a few, they're sometimes very similar, but sometimes they're different. And I agree with your assessment that the unusual characteristics in this one are that we've been recovering from a drought. So a lot of trees, for example, are weakened. But we had an extended amount of snow for a longer period of time than usual at lower elevations. So I live about halfway between Lincoln and Auburn, and it's not unusual for it to snow there. But it might be there for 2.5 seconds or maybe a half a day. What's unusual is for it to snow down this low and stay.
Absolutely.
And I think I've seen photographs of the Weimar Applegate area, and there's a huge number of oak trees that are down. And so, you know, they're different than pine trees, and they behave differently and cause different kinds of problems. All of that's by way of, every time we have an emergency, I think we have a chance to learn something. And I think that's what we need to take to heart here, how we can, I think we did an extremely good job, but I think we can learn from it and do better as we go forward. As a longtime PG&E customer, one time in a recent wet storm that was normal, but with flooding 15, 20 years ago, my power was out for 3 or 5 days, I think. A long time, not unusual again, also where I live. But what was unusual about this is that as my neighbor's power was coming on, knowing that, you know, it was an emergency circumstance, I was sort of feeling left out because my power wasn't coming on. But PG&E was incredibly helpful about pointing me in the right direction and helping me out. At the end of the day, it turns out I was on some kind of a weird circuit, and PG&E didn't realize that there were a couple of us left in an unusual circumstance. But once they sort of figured out, they were right out there and they fixed everything as best as they could. And there is a difference between the individual homeowner's responsibility for their side of the power, as you mentioned. But PG&E, in my experience, has always been extremely helpful in answering questions and giving people information so that they can get help and get back into a healthy circumstance. So.
Appreciate the
And that
remarks.
brought to
Chairman.
mind one more comment, not necessarily at PG&E, but just as far as our short-term rental ordinance that I know is coming back to us later in January. One of the thoughts I talked to staff about yesterday was making sure we talked about resources and information for power outages, whether it's driven by snowstorms or fire, making sure that visitors in the area who are not educated and prepared understand what resources they need to have and what the house needs to have or the rental needs to have.
And that, that's another attribute that I would factor into this particular storm, was over the holiday season. So not only did we have an unusual storm followed by drought, but we had a gazillion travelers in our neck of the woods. And so again, when you sort of replay those scenarios, that's where I think the emergency preparedness can help, and that's where the board can be of use in terms of helping with strategy, but also as a communication forum as we go forward. So.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to Supervisor Gustafson's District 5 Town Hall tomorrow. I will be there as the presenter, where I will be sharing a number of pieces of information. I'll be illustrating circuit locations, impacts, speaking to sort of the patchwork of restoration. It can be terribly frustrating when your neighbor's on both sides of you and your house isn't, for example. So I'm going to provide a lot of clarifying information around that issue. And then one thing I failed to note, and Dave may have mentioned this, but one thing that was a priority for us and that we're really proud of is that all the schools in Placer County are back in service today for the first day of school, with the exception of the Weimar Institute, which has backup generation, and then we're providing temporary generation for their wastewater treatment systems. So that's a big win for us. So anyways, appreciate it. Please reach out anytime if I can be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Dave, do you have anything else?
Just wanted to thank the board for your continued support. We're here to help, and we're working hard, and looking forward to those after actions. We always do one of those after this one. I think this one will be perhaps incredibly insightful. We had a lot of different moving parts that maybe we don't always get a chance to do all at the same time, so we're looking
Just
forward to that.
thinking over the last several days, Dave, you've been with the county for a long time, but not in emergency services, and you take on the job and everything unravels here. So
I have heard that a couple of times this week. Unfortunately.
you've learned under fire, but again, thanks to you and all of your good work.
So again, I just ask for your board's approval
Yeah.
to ratify the local emergency. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. With that, I'll open it up to the public to see if anyone from the public would like to comment. Seeing none, we have the request for ratifying a proclamation of local emergency services. What is the pleasure of the board?
Adopting a resolution.
Say that again.
Adopt a resolution ratifying.
Yes. Adopt a resolution ratifying the declaration of emergency. So with that, what is the pleasure of the board? Motion Gustafson, second home. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Yeah, thanks all. With that, we'll adjourn for the day.